Hello everyone and welcome once again to The View from the Midwest. I apologize for taking last week off, but I had a basketball tournament to cover, so that's why I was gone. But we're going to get a double dip here as we're going to talk about the last couple weeks now as we review the NHL Central. And for those of you who are watching on YouTube, if you wonder why I don't cover the Blues in these videos, it's because I write articles for the site bleedinblue.com, so go ahead and check that out. There's a lot of other great writers. We got a lot of good stuff going on up there. We're building up this site as good as we can, so go ahead and check that out as well. But let's talk about the rest of the Central Division. So let's start things off with the division-leading Blackhawks. They went 2-1 this week after going 1-1 the week prior. They started off last week with a 3-1 loss at home to Nashville before playing the Washington Capitals on a nationally televised game and winning that one 3-2. Then they went on the road and lost to Boston 4-2, and that game was sandwiched in between two games against Detroit. Chicago won both of them. The one on the road was a 5-2 win, and then they won 4-1 in Chicago. All of that was pretty much matched by the Dallas Stars. The Stars lost 6-3 at home against the Jets in a really disappointing loss there. Then 3-2 against the Rangers. Same score they dropped to the Detroit Red Wings before coming home for a 5-3 loss to Nashville. And then they would get two wins against New Jersey by a score of 4-2, and then Sunday over the Senators 2-1. The Nashville Predators are still right in the thick of things in the playoff race as they went 2-1 this week after going 4-0 the week prior. They've pretty much been on a roll. They won 3-1 at Toronto and at Chicago as well with that same score, and then 5-0 over the Blues in what was a fairly embarrassing loss for St. Louis, and then 5-3 over Dallas on Tuesday. They did lose to New Jersey 5-4. But then they came back and beat Colorado 5-2 to cap off their most recent week. The Minnesota Wild, trying to keep their playoff hopes alive, doing a reasonably good job. They went 3-1 this week, but they went 1-3 last week, so it all kind of washes each other out. They lost to the Islanders 4-1 and then went on the road to Philly and Washington, where they lost 3-2 in both of those games before coming home and beating the Panthers 3-1. This week they beat the Avs at home 6-3, won on the road against Toronto 2-1, and in Buffalo 3-2 before losing their game to the St. Louis Blues last night, thus ending their win streak. And rounding out the playoff hopefuls, the Colorado Avalanche went 1-2 this week. They went 1-1 the last week. They beat the Sharks at home last Wednesday 4-3 before losing two straight. Once at home to the Red Wings in the Stadium Series by a score of 5-3 in a game where they came out and they played really well. You thought that they would kind of get that bump from not only playing on nationalized television but having the Stadium Series game and whatnot, but they just couldn't get the offense rolling, and a few key mistakes in that game really kind of cost them with that 5-3 loss, and then they ended up losing to the Wild 6-3 on the road as well. They rebounded on Thursday with a 3-2 win over the Panthers, but then, as I mentioned, fell 5-2 to the Nashville Predators. The Winnipeg Jets are pretty much out of any kind of contention right now, and their records this past couple weeks are perfect examples why. 1-3 this week and 1-2 last week. Interestingly enough, their wins were against pretty decent teams. They had a 6-3 win over Dallas, which I mentioned. That was last Wednesday. And then a 4-2 win over Montreal, who obviously, except for their goaltending situation, still has a pretty good team, even though they have not managed to solidify themselves as a playoff spot yet. That was back on Saturday with that 4-2 win by Winnipeg. The losses were 5-3 to Dallas, 4-1 to Pittsburgh, 3-2 to Florida, 4-3 to the Islanders, and a really disappointing 2-1 loss to the almost always retooling Edmonton Oilers. That happened just this past weekend. So, looking at the standings, the Blackhawks and Stars are currently still tied with 87 points atop the Central Division. The Blackhawks have more wins, so they get the nod there. They have 41 wins, 21 losses, and 5 overtime losses. The Stars' record is 40-20-7. Everybody has played 67 games in terms of the top 3 teams in the division. So the Blues no longer have games in hand, neither do any of the other teams. The Blues are currently sitting in third place in the division with 85 points. They're only 2 back despite their myriad of injuries. They are 38-20-9. The Predators still in things if they can really get something rolling here at the end of the season. They're 33-21-12 for 78 points. Behind them, the Wild with 72 points, 31-26-10. The Avalanche keeping their hopes alive, but ever so slimly, as they are 33-30-4 with 70 points. And as I mentioned, the Jets are all but out of it. 27-33-5 with 59 points. They would basically have to win almost the rest of their games and hopefully get some some teams to lose in front of them. I didn't have a chance to cover the trade deadline, so we're not going to go into that in great detail. I will say this: the Chicago Blackhawks added a lot of pieces, a lot of role players, a lot of third and fourth line guys, maybe sneaking somebody in there in the second line. Obviously, Andrew Ladd picked up a little bit before the deadline, is going to slip into that number one role, but he's not necessarily a top-line player in terms of production, but he fits in that line where the Blackhawks need him. I am amazed that the Chicago Blackhawks managed to find this wiggle room within their salary cap situation to continually add players, but everybody online was just going crazy. Oh, the Blackhawks are improving their team, and the Stars are improving their team, and this team's improving, that team's improving, and the Blues are standing pat. Well, I wrote an article about this on bleedingblue.com, so I'm not going to go into great detail as I mentioned. But if you really look at the production that those players are giving, I don't see any of those players that were added putting those teams over the top. You can still say that the teams that made deals might be better than the Blues overall, but to me that was the case whether or not they made any trades or not. So I don't see this trade deadline really solidifying anybody as an absolute 100% lock as a cup champion. So it was really much ado about nothing. Would I have liked to have seen the Blues made a move? Yes, obviously, as a fan, you're going to want your team to try to help themselves going into the postseason. But if it was too much to give up for any of the return, and you looked at the names, other than Andrew Ladd, I don't see anybody out there that really made a move that could have come into the Blues and made an impact. So therefore, I'm not all that upset with the Blues not making a move, and I don't think any of the names that were added at the trade deadline really make a huge, definite impact as far as any of those other teams go. But I want to know what you guys have to say about all that. Leave some comments in the comment section, whether on the site or whether on YouTube or Facebook, wherever you happen to watch this video. To keep the conversation rolling, that is The View from the Midwest, the weekly look back at the NHL Central Division. Comment, rate, and subscribe. Give us a thumbs up on Facebook or YouTube. But until the next time, I'll see you then.